I'd like to introduce our panelists for this morning. First, Scott Checkaway. Welcome. Scott has over 30 years of experience in the IT industry, has devoted the last 20 years to healthcare IT, and has served as the CIO for the past 6 years at Media Analytics, One Home Humana, and Dental Exchange. He is responsible for overseeing IT operations, data management to ensure that the companies remain at the forefront of technologies. Welcome, Scott. And I also want to point out he is very passionate about barbecue cooking and has participated in several competitions. Additionally, he has created his own rubs and sauces, and he's smoking a hog tonight for the Hawaiian cookout. Welcome. Next is Carrie Gluck. She is a seasoned IT and information security professional with over 30 years of experience. She specializes in cybersecurity, risk management, and regulatory compliance. Currently, she serves as the Chief Information Security Officer at Rectangle Health, where she oversees corporate IT, cybersecurity operations to ensure the protection of customer and patient data. Prior to this role, Carrie was the AVP of Information Technology Security at Yukon Health, where she honed her expertise in safeguarding critical information systems. And she loves eating barbecue food. Come on. I'm right there with you. Let's go. Awesome. And then next, and our final panelist is Bill Radford. He has served as the Vice President of IT Infrastructure at Affordable Care for 3 years, where he leads the implementation of transformational technologies. Bill brings over 31 years of executive leadership, business development, cybersecurity expertise, particularly in MSP, telephony, call center, and data center infrastructures. As a recognized thought leader, he has been instrumental in advancing infrastructure consolidation and standardization models that enable dynamic growth. Bill has also developed certification programs for ISO 27001, SOC 2, PCI, and HIPAA. Welcome. Awesome. We're going to have a good conversation this morning, so let's have a seat. Everybody buckle up and let's get ready. Right on. My first question in regards to deconstructing cyber events, Scott, I'm going to go to you first, is how has the threat landscape evolved over the last few years, and what new threats should organizations be aware of?
Well, thank you for the time, and thank you, everybody. The landscape has become complex, as I'm sure many of you have been aware of. You think about 10 years ago to now. 10 years ago, it was somebody who really had to have some deep programming skills to be a hacker. Now you have things as ransomware as a service. And it's a real thing. And they even have call centers. You can even call in as a hacker in the deep web and grab your own hacking tools. You don't need a whole lot of experience anymore. And this changes the whole landscape on what you need to be thinking about and how you protect yourself. You have supply chain attacks. You have phishing attacks, as Patrick mentioned. So the whole landscape has become very complex, and you need to make sure that you have that forethought, that understanding of the security landscape, just to be in business nowadays.
Yeah. What other recent cyber security threats come to mind, Carrie or Bill?
So what I would add is for the ransomware as a service, it's not just that you can buy the hacking tools, it's that you can actually pay an organization to launch the attacks for you. So you don't even need experience hacking if you can get in touch with these organizations and they just launch it for you and then they split the money with you. So it has brought the level of knowledge down to a point where just about anybody can do it. We used to refer to people as script kiddies, those people that hide in their parents' basements and kind of play around with it. Well, those don't really exist anymore. They can just go right to the professionals and launch their attacks. I think another thing that's important, and I think we'll talk about it more when we start talking about AI, is also the level of knowledge has reduced because of the availability of AI. It takes it and it moves it from a manual process or a manual process that requires scripting and feed and care associated with it to something that is automated, automatically learns, and then executes on what it learns. So it requires very little intervention. I know we're going to talk about it from a different aspect later, but that's one of the things that I really see and I'm concerned about.
Wow.
So I used to bring in a lot of new IPs and existing IP addresses. When you bring them up online, you would set a clock. It used to be funny. It was 5-10 minutes or so before someone would be attacking you. Now where the joke is it going to take longer than 1 second? Because pretty much the second you turn an IP, it could be off for 8 years, turn it on, and you're going to get hit instantly. They're instantly scanning. They're 24-hour-a-day scanning. And now it's along with the lines of some of the kids. It's just amazing some of the things that they can get in those. If they do find a way to get in, they have so many tools available to them. Just say you're an administrator, what's the first thing an administrator is going to do if he sees a computer acting funky? He's going to go log in as an administrator. Well, if they've got the right toolkit, they're grabbing his credentials, not only when he typed it, but if they're still cached in the computer from where he was in there yesterday. So once he's got domain admin credentials and things like that, he's got the keys to the kingdom, and they just start searching and finding and putting their own projects and things in, and you won't know it if you don't have the right software in there to see it coming at you.
That's sophistication on a whole nother level, right? I think one thing I want to bring forward too is the human factor. You know, you mentioned the admin, you know, looking at it and logging in. Carrie, what role do employees play in regards to preventing cyber incidents? You know, we talk about the sophistication on that end, but what's the sophistication, you know, on our end as organizations that we should have in place to help prevent or mitigate this as much as possible?
Right, so stepping away from the technical folks, obviously they have different requirements, and going back to like the workforce in general and that user base, I think the most important thing is that they have training. I know in a lot of organizations, training is done on an annual basis to meet those compliance requirements where we talk about HIPAA and privacy regulations, and you know, we kind of check the box a lot of times, but training requires much more than that now. It requires training on phishing, on social engineering, on how to report incidents, how to secure physical documents. It covers a vast number of things, right? So we have to think of our workforce as our first line of defense, right? Our attackers are targeting them. They're easy targets. It's easier to social engineer an end user than it is to break through a firewall. So they automatically go there first. So I think statistically they're saying that 70 to 90%, depending on where you're getting your source from, of successful ransomware attacks are often generated or start with a successful social engineering attack. So if you're not training your users on how to identify and report social engineering attacks, or how to report when they figure out a little too late that they clicked on that suspicious link or that they downloaded that suspicious file, now their computer is acting weird, that's when we start running into trouble. So you need to think of different ways to provide that training. It needs to be more than just, here's the HIPAA laws, here are the privacy laws, here, you know, pick your law. It needs to be, you know, something that's interesting, relevant, and engaging to the user, something that they can take and use not only from a workplace perspective, but how it impacts them personally, right? Because that's how you get them involved in really thinking about it. So we use a couple of techniques at Rectangle Health. Obviously, we have the annual training that's required for HIPAA. We all have to do that, but we also engage our user community by doing things like doing monthly training. It can be 5 minutes long. We started off with a TV series type training. Initially, we started with a comedy program that was well received. They used funny scenarios that are kind of far-fetched, but really got the point across. Then we switched to a drama series, right? The Inside Man. Oh my gosh. We had so much engagement. People were actually posting quotes from the show in their cubicles. So that's, really getting engaged. Now, when I had to announce that we were stopping the Inside Man, I thought there was going to be a riot that broke out. So I actually had to post it as optional learning so people could continue to watch the series. So that's one thing. We also send notices every 2 weeks about relevant topics, things that are happening in the real world. It could be, scams about natural disasters that have happened, and watching out for those scams where attackers are trying to social engineer and collect money that isn't really going to a real organization. It could be about a natural disaster or any number of topics. So we send those out every 2 weeks. It's relevant to not only the workplace because it's teaching them how to identify scams, but also helping them protect themselves from falling for those scams. So they're not giving their own personal money to somebody with nefarious intent.
Awesome. Scott, can you talk about the consequences, though, of someone who does click on something? I'm not saying it was me, Patrick, but no. But somebody who clicks on something, right? Or is that end user that starts that progress of a cyber attack on a DSO, both for the organization and its patients?
Well, I think probably almost everybody here can probably vouch for what happened just a few months ago, with Change Healthcare and what happened to everybody there. That is a serious consequence. We hear about them in the news all the time. You've got operational, financial, IT, every aspect of it is affected in some way, shape, or form. The vigilance is not a 9-to-5 job. You talked about the programs. The programs don't stop when you're at work. They're with your phone. They're with every aspect of the Internet of Things. They can be with your TV. And it's not meant to scare, it's just meant to be an awareness that everything that you have interconnected, it could be a threat. And you have to think about that when you're using this stuff. Same thing that happens with any organization is that aspect of downtime. Patrick talked about the fear. There's a healthy fear in this case in security. You have to have a healthy fear of what could happen so that you can be protected. The education pieces are absolutely paramount. It's the human education of what you're going to do, what you're going to click on, should always be there at the forefront to make sure, am I doing something that could harm myself, my organization, in an electronic sense? And that's what happened at Change. It's what happened with CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike wasn't a ransomware event. It was we talked about patching. It happens at every level. And so the due diligence amongst yourself, amongst your organization is key.
When the training, the two things come together, you can train the humans over and over and over and over, and the best of them can still make the mistake. I mean, you can have your guy in charge of security who is the third person in line who checks the files that he's approving that your organization can install, and he can make a mistake. It could be a simple one letter is out of line. He's just not paying attention to it that one day. Everything looks normal. He checks it. Next thing you know, instead of advanced IP scanning, you've got a advanced IP scanner, and that has payload in it that is very destructive. And so just simple things that you can never let up, period. Every day, every night. Weekends, we have staff get together. It's like, all right, this is the weekend. So instead of like getting ready to go to vacation, you need to be getting ready for an attack. Because whether you know it or not, it's happening.
Bill, can you kind of walk through that, highlight that importance of, having a comprehensive incident, plan, and, what do you guys do over at Affordable Care that I think is, you kind of explained it to me a little bit, and I was like, dang, that's impressive.
So I like to everybody uses acronyms, most of you can't remember. But when it comes to an incident response plan, why do you need an incident response plan? Evil. So I use that. So what does my incident response plan need to cover? It needs to cover the things that we need to do to protect the business, the finances, the customers. But ultimately, what does it take to get there? And that's where I go with evil. Employees, you have to have your preparation for your employees, your vendors and partners, your insurance, and your legal teams. And all of those four things will guide down into the pieces that you need to actually have an effective incident response plan. Then I go with a QTC QA, which is not as easy, but it's because you want everybody's involvement. You don't want this to be the CISO or the IT guy or an admin sitting in the corner somewhere drawing up an incident response plan that's a one-size-fits-all for the entire company. It doesn't work that way. You can do it, it's a document, but it's not going to help you when the time comes. So what we do is we come up with we call it a quick guide. And it is a set of questions that a department needs to be able to answer like that. So you're not wasting time trying to find things and figure things out. So we've built a quick guide that is encompassing. And then on like our quarterly executive leadership meetings, we bring the heads of the departments in and we distribute those. And they go out to a legal, they go out to your purchasing, they go to accounting, they go to HR, everyone. And the kinds of things that we include on those are things that will help them in the case of an actual problem. And those things come down to what are your teams? So you got your Q for your quick guide, your T for your teams. How are these actually going to separate who's going to help? Because those people need to organize in a way that they're going to bring your organization where it needs to be. The C piece is important because a lot of people don't think about communications. If you're actually in the middle of an incident, you're hacked, you must already assume that every single thing that you say and do can be found live by somebody because it can and it is and it does. So you need to set up an external communications method that has nothing to do with your corporate entity. You need to do it through your mobile network, not through your local LAN. So and this is what we did in that we required that the teams all they all provided a personal cell phone number. And then there were WhatsApp groups built ahead of time. A lot of people didn't want to put on WhatsApp because everybody has their opinions about everything, but the point was we had to pick one. So we picked WhatsApp and we built, all these team leaders have an entire chat group that they can hit in a second and say, hey, we have a problem. And they're not going inside and being seen what you're doing. And then the QA piece, ultimately, what questions do you think that we're going to need to be answered, right? So each team's going to need to know things. And those kinds of things are, let's say for instance, in this world, we all have lots of things that we need for practices to run. Have you thought about what happens if your source of this particular tooth or this particular anything you've got is now not available to you because they were hit by some kind of ransomware? No one really thought about change and how everything was going to go through. I mean, you may or may not have, but you didn't most likely have an actual plan. How are you really going to process payments and those kinds of things when something like this happens? So those are the things that we try and bring out and point out. And then the A piece is accounting. What if you're, say, using Great Plains or some other package, and that's part of what gets hit? How are you going to manage your accounts payable? How are you going to pay your vendors? Because they're going to, if they know you're hacked, they're going to be wanting to get paid quickly. So those kinds of ththings, you need to have backup plans. Do you have a paper strategy? Which I think most people should, but if you don't, this is the one industry that you might have a paper plan. Most industries don't have it. So, but those things, you really have to take it all the way through the entire organization. And that was really one of the most impressive things I think that happened for me in the early days at Affordable Care was every single senior leader jumped in and embraced it. And it was just amazing. I'm used to fighting, it's like, look, the HR has to be here. And yes, I know you're the CEO, but you have to know this. And yes, the CFO, and yes, this and that. Everybody has to be involved. Well, they were like, let's go. They all took it. And we gave them like a couple of weeks to work on it, pulled in a meeting, and everybody had everything complete. So the point of that is you need your organization's buy-in, and that's challenging, but you have to just figure out what it is that it takes to get them there.
Something important to add too, you talked about backups, like paper backups, but if you all remember, especially in the IT world, the big joke was backups. Do you have backups? Well, now it's no longer a joke. It's how reliable are your backups? How often have you tested your backups? What's your DR plan? How does the DR plan work? Coming out of Change Healthcare, I can assure you, most people are really thinking about that very heavily right now. And so it's a really good strategy. All of these strategies that we're talking about are important. Having that backup plan, having those backups and validating and testing, equally as important nowadays.
We're going to have a panel on vendors this afternoon. Looking forward to that. Everybody say, oh yeah?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, come on now. But Scott, I wanted to ask you this, concerning vendors though, in their cybersecurity measures, what should DSOs expect from vendors who access some or all portions of their PHI?
Making sure you have the typical standard stuff, the NDA, the BAA, but are they high trust certified? Are they SOC 2 certified? Those certifications there's parts of it that are check the box, but there's parts of it that have teeth to that, making sure, are you following some of those NIST standards that Patrick talked about? That they're in there, they're in those areas. And yes, they can get complicated and burdensome, and I've been through it more times than I could count, but they're meaningful. And it's not just a check the box effort. It's really making sure that your organization is secure, that your organization has the right processes, procedures, and technology. All three are required to really be in this digital age and be protected.
I just want to add to that because I know us as an organization, we as an organization do put a lot of reliance on the SOC 2 reports. But it's really important that people don't just accept the SOC 2 reports, actually go in and read them because the controls that you're looking for may not have been tested. So you need to make sure that all of your security requirements are being addressed in that SOC report. And if they are not, then you should go back to the vendors and ask for more information regarding the missing controls.
It's never a bad thing to challenge.
Right, absolutely.
Carrie, what steps should DSOs take to prepare for and respond to ransomware attacks?
So I actually think that a lot of that was covered just a few minutes ago. Obviously, we want to have an incident response plan. Like mentioned, one size fits all doesn't work when it comes to incident response. You need a number of different things. One thing that wasn't necessarily mentioned is playbooks. So this is more for your technical folks of, okay, we're getting a distributed denial of service attack. What would we do from a technical perspective to respond to that type of event? So you need to have those in place. Obviously, they need to be tested, but they need to be tested from two perspectives, right? You have your technical incident response test where you get your technical team together, you pick a type of event, and you test against that event. Does our response work? Does our playbook actually fall in line with the requirements we have? But then there's the leadership test that needs to occur, especially when it comes to ransomware. So I had an event with our leadership team. We spent 2.5 hours in a room. We went over 20 slides. 2.5 hours was not long enough. We actually had to stop the discussion to move to the next slide. The question about whether to pay or not to pay, how you're communicating both internally and externally. Those internal communications are almost as important or just as important as the external communications, right? Because you want to make sure your customer support team isn't going out there and telling your customer when they call in, oh yeah, we're having a ransomware attack, right? We want to make sure that we have the script for them so that they know what to say to a customer. We're having system maintenance, there's a system outage, more information will be forthcoming on our website shortly. So you want to make sure that those communications and scripts are in place beforehand. So the other things that I would add is cyber insurance is truly a critical component to incident response right now. So it's not just having that financial coverage, but the cyber insurance carriers actually offer a lot of resources to help you further secure your environments. They're offering tools for performing risk assessments. They're offering training modules. They're offering, discounts on forensics companies to come in and restore your environment in the event that you have a ransomware attack. And then the other thing that I would add to that is actually putting a forensics team on retainer if you can afford to do so. That way, instead of waiting 24 to 48 hours to have a company come in and actually begin that initial analysis and response and recovery phase, you can get them in 4 to 8 hours. And the great part of having that company on retainer is that you don't use the hours that you have purchased. They most of the time have other services that you can use those hours against. So with our retainer, we can have them come in and do penetration testing. We can have them come in and do a leadership tabletop exercise. We can have them do a technical tabletop exercise. There's a whole number of service offerings that we can use those hours for if we don't have an event that requires to use our hours. So those would be, I think, important.
And the important thing on all that, it's not just important to have it, it's important to practice it. And in the case of the things you're saying, when we brought the executives together with their quick guides on what that they would do, they came in the door, they're ready to go. What they didn't know is when we closed the door, I called Henry Schein and I said, hey, flip over to our disaster recovery environment. And we literally did a live test with the execs in the room of what it took to go from your live environment. Say it was a lights out test. They literally killed the network. Everybody had to flip over. So it was brave, right? But it was necessary. It was a real test with everybody sitting in the room, real nerves. How do you really perform during that time? And I'm not saying go that far, but I'm saying it's not unheard of, and it works for us. And it really, again, it got the buy-in.
And you can step into things like that. The tabletop tests that are being talked about, great starter points where you just get around the table, you talk about the event. Certainly can lead up to that. That's a great test, and real DR testing it's necessary. Just like we were talking about backups, the DR flip over is just as important.
And how often, Bill, do you do that? Quarterly? Do you do that biannually? Because I think, Carrie, you mentioned your company, right, does it twice a year, biannually, right?
So we do the leadership incident response training annually. We do the technical incident response testing twice a year, and we do full disaster recovery testing twice a year on our primary production environments.
Okay.
We follow the same lines, but we choose things for monthly that's independent of those. If there's a thing that we see popping up in our trouble tickets that seems to be an issue, we'll choose something monthly and we'll announce, say, this is what this month's test is going to be.
Sure.
And in our case, we're annual right now, but we're moving to a monthly DR failover. It'll be a full synchronous failover, and everybody will be in a good spot in that sense because we'll have patching that we're going to do, and you do the failover patching. So it kind of kills two birds with one stone.
And something that everybody's familiar with is penetration testing, and that's something that we kept saying annually. Traditionally, you think of this as an annual exercise, but I can assure you that in the next 12 months, if not faster than that, almost every industry in the world is going to rotate to a monthly penetration testing at a minimum. And your security updates and standards are also going, during their next update, they will be updated to something much more often than an annual as well.
So what I'm hearing is, if we're not doing that now, we need to start. And just start somewhere, right? Build a plan, and then begin to grow that. Where it's tabletop conversations, it's trouble, it's annual, those type of things. With the resources and the tools and everything that's out there for all of us, our organizations and our companies to utilize to safeguard ourselves, and it's a question here for Bill, is immunity from events, incidents a reality if DSOs have, and companies, vendors, have all the right tools, processes, and people in place?
Well, I don't think any organization protects everybody. In the case of IT, it absolutely does not protect you at all. You can have every single thing. I mean, we've had bad teams, good teams, great teams, the best teams, and they're going to find a way to get through. So no matter what it is, people come so many different directions, you can't even predict it. You can just do the best you can do. But I would say don't be overconfident ever, because you are susceptible every single day. Right now, sitting here this moment, your organization is at risk.
Appreciate that. Last question. We got 2 minutes left, and I want to make this, bring this forward. Future trends, innovations. How are emerging technologies like AI and machine learning being used to enhance cybersecurity in DSOs, or the opposite? Or we just go right down the line.
Yeah, we talked a lot about the fear and the threat, but AI can be used as a tool of good as well. There are a bunch of security AI tools out there that do real-time threat analysis, real-time prevention. They're looking at phishing patterns and ransomware and malware patterns, and being able to prevent those types of attacks. I saw Patrick had put a sample slide up about amount of attacks prevented. That's a real thing, and that happens all the time. And you can have AI tools that will do that for you, and you can sleep a little bit better. You can't not live in the healthy fear, but you can at least sleep a little bit better knowing that those types of attacks are just automatically being handled.
Right, and I would add that another benefit is that it can actually go through large amounts of data very quickly. So it can reduce the amount of time it takes to achieve those detections and the responses. I do think there's some things that need to be considered when you're considering the use of AI. One, and I don't know if you've heard this, is garbage in, garbage out, right? So if AI has to be trained, right? And it's trained by the inputs that are entered into whatever AI tool you're using. If you have a lot of garbage going into those AI systems, it will start generating false responses. So you have to be mindful of that. And then from a security and compliance perspective, there needs to be an understanding of, if you're using an AI service, how is your data being protected? Right? Are you pushing your data out into a public environment where anybody else that uses that system can generate through their prompts and pull back your data? What are the security controls that are in place? So there's things like that really need to be kept in mind. If you're doing software development, are the prompts pulling back publicly available libraries, or are they private libraries? Because you end up, if they're public libraries, you end up with two potential issues. You have infringement laws that you could be violating, and then you also have the potential for developers to be pulling in code with malware built into it. So, learn what those issues can be, and be comfortable with it. Know what questions to ask so that you can be comfortable with it, because it is a great asset to the organizations. Definitely something that needs to be explored. But going back to that box of fear and uncertainty, we need to do what we need to do to get past that uncertainty.
Bill, last thoughts.
So make it fast.
Yep.
2 sentences. One, if you're not using AI, I assure you that the bad people are. Right? 2, we're not going to need programmers much longer. I know that's a bold statement, but I can tell you right now, I can walk over to my computer and type in a couple of paragraphs and say, build me a business model, software, and everything for me to build an AI chatbot. And I can have everything I need in 5 minutes to file the corporations, all the code in Python, and have it distributed to a website in 10 minutes. So you can't afford not to use it.
Scott, Carrie, Bill, thank you for your time. Who learned something today?